Sorry, scared you guys. Good evening and welcome to tonight's Monday, February 2nd, 2026 City Council meeting. I would first wait a motion to leave the non-public session and to seal the meeting minutes of that session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Kelly, will you please take the roll?
Yep. Mayor McCachran,
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Cook,
Here.
Councilor Tabor,
Here.
Councilor Blaylock,
Present.
Councilor Bagley,
Here.
Councilor Moreau,
Here.
Councilor Flynn,
Here.
Councilor Hopkins.
Here.
I'd like to start the meeting before the pledge with a couple of thoughts. First, want to send our condolences to Kristen Wilson, the wife of Heath Wilson, who passed away last week. He was a fantastic coach, a great dad to Tegan and Rowan. He was on Little League. There wasn't a lot of things that he wasn't involved in the community. Our hearts go out to their family in this incredibly difficult time, and we keep you in your thoughts. I would also like to note the snowstorm and all the DPW folks that are still moving snow, actually, probably right now. And it takes a lot of effort. I got a number of emails and texts from some of our less able residents that were shoveled out by the IGOT Bridge crew, and Freddie Patrone did a great job. And just as a reminder, the sidewalk plows will come, but there's no reason why you can't help out a neighbor. And always remember, I saw a lot of little kids shoveling out fire hydrants. And this always takes a village to get through one of these big storms like this. Have the patience with our DPW crew. There's a lot of work. I know that it doesn't always seem like it's a lot, but this storm certainly showed that it was. So thank you to the DPW. And just before we, I know I'm going on here, but before we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, I just want to take a second. I think folks are always surprised that I'm a pretty happy person and a pretty optimistic person when it comes, especially to government and just a belief in democracy. And in no small way, that's because we get to stand here and do government a lot. And we remind ourselves every day that we're here. We start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I just want to take a moment, especially as there are, there's a lot of concern, both far and closer to home, in terms of what our government chooses to do. And I just want to say that the government here in Portsmouth is always going to make sure that we protect the rights of all of us. The First Amendment, the Second Amendment, all of those amendments, our job is to protect those inalienable rights that we have. So as we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, I just want to just take a moment to flesh out that it's liberty and justice for all, and it's a great reminder that we get the chance to do government here and hopefully set an example of doing government the right way, and appreciate, as we put our hands on our chest, just thinking about that a little bit more deeply tonight. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Speaking of good government, Kelly, you got a lot of minutes for us to look through here. We have the acceptance of minutes for November 17th, December 8th, December 22nd, and January 5th.
Your Honor, I move to accept and approve the minutes of the November 17th, 2025, December 8th, 2025, December 22nd, 2025, and January 5th, 2026 City Council meetings.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And now it's our honor to welcome in Black History Month with a proclamation. Whereas in 1926, Dr. Carter G. Woodson created the week-long commemoration that has become Black History Month, selecting February because it contained the birthdays of two major influences in Black life at that time, Abraham Lincoln, February 12th, and Frederick Douglass, February 14th. And whereas February is now observed throughout the nation as Black History Month with special programs and events this year commemorating a century of celebrations, and whereas as we are reminded by vibrant celebrations in Portsmouth of Dr. Martin Luther King Day, Juneteenth, the New England BIPOC Festival, the stories of African and African American residents are woven deep in the fabric of our city. Black citizens throughout our history remind us of the shadows of enslaved residents as early as 1645 and the 1779 petition for freedom etched in the African Burying Ground Memorial. They remind us as well of the civic contributions of our early free Black residents and their descendants and successors. And whereas in 2020, the Portsmouth City Council passed a resolution which declared Portsmouth to be a racial justice municipality, we continue to stand proudly with the Seacoast NAACP, the Seacoast African American Cultural Center, the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire, the New England BIPOC Festival, and many others who celebrate the complex history of Africans and African Americans in Portsmouth. And whereas we are resolved to affirm the city's commitment by hosting events, providing helpful pathways to additional resources, alerting employees and board and commission members to training opportunities, and identifying ways to advance dialogues with stakeholders for racial justice. Now, therefore, I, Dago McCachran, Mayor of the City of Portsmouth, on behalf of the members of the City Council and the citizens of Portsmouth, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2026 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire as Black History Month, and urge all citizens to champion, now more than ever, our commitment to racial equity and inclusion and to sustain the open door of diversity throughout our community. Given with my hand and the seal of the City of Portsmouth on this second day of February. Thank you. Next, we have public comment. If anybody had meant to sign up and you missed it, here it is. But Gerald Duffy on housing, what else?
Limited to 45 minutes, right?
Yeah, if it's just you, Jerry, you get the whole time.
Okay, Jerry Duffy, 428 Pleasant Street. And congratulations to the Mayor and those of you who are re-elected, and special congratulations to the newly elected councillors. I've just got a few comments about how housing is governed in Portsmouth this evening. This isn't a critique of the master plan process, and it's not a disagreement about values. It's a governance question. Portsmouth, as you know, is facing a housing crisis without a housing action plan, meaning there is no single accountable framework that sets targets, assigns responsibility, establishes timelines, and allows the public to track results. And that absence matters. So by every measurable standard, rents, availability, workforce housing, and the widening gap between wages and housing costs, Portsmouth is under strain. Yet housing policy is being managed through a patchwork of boards, committees, and case-by-case decisions without a shared set of outcomes the city is explicitly trying to achieve. So action plans exist for a reason. They translate concern into execution. They clarify who's responsible for what, by when, and how progress is measured. Portsmouth currently has no such document for housing, and the result is predictable: fragmentation, delay, and production levels that fall well short of what the city itself acknowledges it needs. We already understand the scale mismatch. Permanently affordable housing works, but we produce it far too slowly. Ruth Griffin Place is a success story, yet its vetted waiting list alone exceeds 400 households. As a result, similar projects in the pipeline are already fully allocated before construction begins. Meanwhile, roughly half of Portsmouth residents rent. Many are cost-burdened, time-constrained, and this is a much underappreciated fact, I think, effectively absent from land use processes that reward money, time, and legal representation. So without deliberate counterweights, outcomes will continue to favor those already housed, and we become an island of affluence. The forthcoming master plan will not resolve this. It is not designed to. Master plans typically articulate long-term values and aspirations. Action plans establish near-term responsibilities, sequencing, and accountability. Confusing the two ensures drift. Housing policy ultimately rests with this council. Voters put the council in charge, and it sets priorities, directs staff, and decides whether housing is governed deliberately or left to inertia and the status quo. So my request tonight is modest and forward-looking, that the council recognises the absence of a housing action plan as a governance gap and commit to closing it with a clear, accountable framework that this body can oversee and the public can track. Years from now, the question will not be whether Portsmouth cared about housing, it will be whether it governed it with intention. Cities that produce housing do so because they plan for it explicitly. Portsmouth is overdue for that conversation and for the structure to support it. Thanks very much for hearing me out.
Thanks, Jerry. Anybody else rising for public comment? Any on Zoom? Going once, going twice. All right. Next up are the public hearings, and we don't have any this evening. City manager items which require action.
Thank you. First up, Your Honor, is a request for the second in a series of Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund Rate Model Study Follow-Up Work Session requests. And as you will remember, we had a work session back on January 14th where consultant Stantec presented their rate study process and their initial findings. And what they would like to do is to come back on March 2nd and hold a second work session, at which time they would share recommendations with respect to proposed changes in the water and sewer rates and fees based on additional information that they've gleaned.
Your Honor, I'd move to schedule a work session on March 2nd, 2026 at 6 o'clock p.m. for the purpose of presenting and discussing the findings and recommendations of the water and sewer rate study.
Second?
And I'm just trying, and that's a Monday, correct?
Yes, so it's
Right.
Before a
council-
city
so it's
council
before
meeting?
council.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Item number 2 is a purchase and sale agreement for land adjacent to and related to the project at the Greenland Well, where the city is planning and is currently in design stages for the PFAS treatment facility. And what we have found in that process is that we require land beyond the boundary of the property currently owned by the city, and that land is 1.07 acres of Greenland town-owned property. And the town of Greenland, this is timely because the town has it on their town warrant for town meeting on March 10th. And the value, as agreed upon by both parties, is roughly $16,000. And through discussions with the Select Board of Greenland, a PNS has been drafted that does not convey cash, but recognizes we would make improvements through the construction and paving of an access road that would value similarly that approximate dollar amount. So the draft PNS agreement is attached and in the packet and includes a survey plan. And while the City of Portsmouth and the Town of Greenland may make minor edits to the final draft, the town and city are both seeking to move forward by working to fulfill the contingencies outlined in the draft PNS, namely getting town meeting approval in Greenland on March 10th and getting City Council authorization here tonight to allow me to proceed with legal and the Town of Greenland. And both Suzanne Woodland and Al Pratt, who are most familiar with the project, are here to answer any questions.
Your Honor, I move to authorize the city manager to enter into a purchase and sale agreement in substantially similar form as provided in the agenda packet to procure approximately 1.07 acres from the town of Greenland and take all further action subsequent thereto that may be necessary to close on the subject project if contingencies are met.
Second.
Any questions for Suzanne or Al on this one?
I think it's
Pretty
Strategic
straightforward.
long-term protection of our
well.
water supplies.
Town's been great to work with.
We love to hear it.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you. The third item and final item tonight is your approval of renewal and update to the Municipal Alliance for Adaptive Management, or catchphrase MAM. Back in 2020, the U.S. EPA issued, as you will recall, the Great Bay Total Nitrogen General Permit, which regulates the nitrogen discharges from 12 New Hampshire communities that operate wastewater treatment facilities, which outlet directly or indirectly to the Great Bay Estuary. And the general permit is unique in that it allows for regulated communities to opt in to an adaptive management approach to nitrogen reduction, which we have done. We are proud to work with the communities that are listed in the packet, and even more impressed with the fact that there are some sewer districts in Maine that are looking to join as well, and an even more collaborative regional approach. The existing intermunicipal agreement, which that created the MAM, is due to expire at the end of this month, and the general permit, which is also due to expire at the end of this month, will be administratively extended by the EPA. So there is interest among the cities and towns in continuing the MAM and working forward to incorporate a few changes. And the changes are pretty minor in nature. One is to reflect the addition of those two main communities, adjustment of language to recognize how the executive board meetings have actually been realized, and removing the cap on the dollar amount of investment in data gathering and analysis in the event that other communities join. Suzanne Woodland is here to answer any questions you may have, but a real highlight would be that the MAM meetings have been proven to be a useful forum in that we've collectively gathered over $1.8 million in funding and another $1 million in congressionally directed spending funds. So as a group, we are much stronger together.
Thank you. This could potentially be an answer from the city manager or maybe Attorney Woodland. What other communities could join this or also use the Great Bay Estuary as a watershed that are not part of this?
I'm appreciative that Suzanne is here.
Me too.
She's on her way. So the communities right now that are not part of MAM but could be would include Somersworth, Newmarket, Durham, and Epping. No,
Epping's
Newfields.
involved.
Newfields.
Yep.
And is this committee, has any communication been brought to those municipalities to see if they are looking to join?
Yes, we routinely reach out to those communities and have invited them for a variety of reasons. They have not to date. However, both EPA and DES, along with CLF, frankly, the Conservation Law Foundation, are very supportive of this organization continuing to grow and collaborate. So there's actually a meeting scheduled for February 5th, this Thursday, where we're going to review what's been done, over the last 4.5 years in terms of the science effort, certain nitrogen reduction tracking we're going to look at, and the communities that are not involved have been once more again specially invited to participate. I know at least some are coming so that they could revisit whether, given the current situation, the administrative extension of the permit, whether they are now interested in participating formally with us. They aren't working against us, they're just not kind of in the same fold, and frankly, from our perspective, not taking advantage of us all working together.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a question about the cost allocation share ranges, noting that Portsmouth is higher than everyone else. How was that determined?
So that is based on our in New Hampshire, it is on our design flows. And so we have 2 treatment plants. So you've got to keep in mind that's what makes us extra special, is that we have both the Pease plant and our Pierce Island plant. And so when you add the 2 together, it looks like a bigger number, or it is a bigger number because we have the 2 plants.
And as a follow-on, is any of this based upon not necessarily design, but can it be reallocated based upon actually usage?
So we discussed that recently when we brought in the main communities. And because this is a longer-term vision, and we recognize that some of the smaller communities still need to upgrade their plants. So when you talk about Epping and Rollinsford, in fact, even Rochester has a huge upgrade that they're working on right now in terms of design and figuring out which way they're going to go for their treatment processes. We thought it was better just to stay with the formula that's been working. We do have a big voice at the table. And I will say that you know, in terms of shaping the science and where we want to put the money for studies. I feel like it's working okay for Portsmouth, and we're going to learn more really over this year because we're in the process of working with our consultants, Brown and Caldwell. They are analyzing the data that we've already gotten and that is still kind of coming in. They're working closely with PREP, the Piscataqua Region Estuary Partnership, and their science advisors, as well as DES. And so it's a very collaborative process right now, and we're trying to figure out where we go from here. And really, that is what the next year is going to be. Actually, all the contributions for the New Hampshire communities actually went down this year because we had the two main communities. So we've actually seen our contribution towards the science and supporting the UNH Stormwater Center, which runs PTAP, which is our nitrogen tracking tool. It went down.
Thank you.
Councilor Tabor.
Yeah, you know, people say regionalizing things won't work in New Hampshire, but I really think this is an example of regionalizing is working. And if folks at home look at the website and the city website and look at the management alliance adaptive management plan information, it's really gratifying to see Portsmouth is setting the best practices. We've overachieved with our wastewater treatment plants. We're doing stormwater, we're managing our wetlands and our buffers, sweeping our streets, doing all the fundamental steps that I think we'll see spread to the others because of the strength of this group. So I'm happy to vote for it. It's a great initiative.
Thank you. Your Honor, if I may just to pick up on a thread, which I think is important, which is our Public Works Department has done a great job not only putting infrastructure into their planning for stormwater treatment, but we are tracking it. And that really goes to the work of Jamie McCarty, who works very closely with the UNH Stormwater Center and this tool that we have for tracking nitrogen reduction. And that includes not only our municipal projects, but all of our development, our private development. When those improvements are made on the site and they're adding those stormwater infrastructure improvements, that all gets tracked. And that's why, in part, our numbers are so good, because we are actually we have a lot of redevelopment. And when we do have that redevelopment, we have the right zoning and the right stormwater regulations to kind of force that better treatment and handling of stormwater, and then we capture it and track it. And that's actually part of what we're going to talk about on February 5th, which is to try and help those other communities that aren't doing such a good job at tracking how we do it and how it might be done and how it could be the burden shared. So.
Councilor Buck.
Your Honor, I move to authorize the city manager to execute the amendment to renew and update the intermunicipal agreement for the development of an adaptive water quality management plan for Great Bay Estuary in a substantially similar form as contained in the agenda packet.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. On to the consent agenda.
I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, email correspondence.
Your Honor, I move to accept and place on file.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, a letter from Melissa Walls of Maeve's Mobile Cocktail Hour and Vagabond Fair, requesting permission to hold a night market of Bohinko Park from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Seeking suggested date. Is there a move?
Your Honor, I move to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is a letter we all received from Mark Alese regarding adjustments to the parking ordinance. I would just say that this was, discussed this with Counselor Bagley, previously, it seems like we're doing a lot of these already, but if PTS could take a look at this letter, certainly wouldn't hurt.
Your Honor, I move to refer to the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee and report back.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And next, on to the council agenda, appointments to be considered. The appointment of Sarah Ingleworth as an alternate to the Arts and Cultural Commission, appointment of Mary Claire Rodriguez Abbott to the Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee, the appointment of Heather Kranz to the Public Art Review Committee, and appointment of Christopher Clement, Senior, to the trustees of the trust funds. Those will be voted at next term. The ones that we have to be voted here are numerous. The reappointment of Jeffrey Cooper to the Arts and Cultural Commission, the appointment of Demi Dubois to the Arts and Cultural Commission, reappointment of Eli Kaner to the Arts and Cultural Commission, appointment of Hope Anderson Puzo to the Arts and Cultural Commission, appointment of Margarita Giacobi as an alternate to the Arts and Cultural Commission, appointment of Joshua Sir to the Economic Development Commission, appointment of Jason Goodrich as an alternate to the Economic Development Commission, appointment of Amy Dutton to the Cemetery Committee, appointment of Jennifer Merriman to the Cemetery Committee, appointment of Susan Sterry to the Municipal Building Blue Ribbon Committee.
Your Honor, I
Oh,
move.
could we just say as presented? Let's see.
Yes. What do I say? Oh, I move to accept as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? No. Well, thank you again for stepping up to serve. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And it's with regret that we accept the resignation of Ellen Feinberg from the Public Art Review Committee.
Your Honor, I move to accept with regret the resignation of Ellen Feinberg from the Public Art Review Committee and to send a letter thanking Ellen for her service to the city.
Second?
Your Honor, I express the thoughts of everyone on the Public Art Review Committee. We just met last week, and we truly missed having Ellen in our presence. She really was quite a force on the committee, and we will really miss her. So thank you so much, Ellen, and hopefully one day you'll come back to the Public Art Review Committee.
Indeed. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ellen. And then this is just a verbal update. It's in the packet. I'm not going to read out every specific goal here, but we did come up with on our retreat, which was public, a list of goals as we have done in the past. I'm going to list off the goals in goal category. The first is housing, and there is a housing action plan buried within that as a deliverable early. The parking and transportation, governance for the governed, that simply means making sure that we are meeting the desires of the community, their ideas to the top first. Goal number 4, arts, culture, and enrichment of residential life. Really a way to make sure that we're enhancing and promoting current programming that supports our year-round residents and community through the arts. Reduce school, number 5, reduce school food poverty. And that's to make sure that in the time of concern that no kid is going hungry here in Portsmouth. And again, at home, you can look through all of these strategic objectives. And then finally, preserving the sense of place. That is both from an activation of waterfront to making sure that we have solar as a priority throughout the city, making sure that we preserve the natural habitat and foster a general love for that for generations to come. So again, a thank you to Carl Weber, Deputy City Manager Carl Weber, who walked us through that process. He's not here this evening, but
He's on Zoom.
He's on Zoom, having fun. But it's always a engaging process to go through. This one was more engaging than in years past. It was enjoyable. This will be woven into our budget conversation, and for those that are looking for, a direction, this is, what we're going to try to tie back all of the things that we do in the budget for the next 2 years here to the goals that we established early on. So no action required on that. Again, always a pleasure to put our ideas and our thoughts down on paper and hold ourselves accountable to them. Councilor Tabor.
Thank you, Mayor. It's budget time again, that annual deliberation when we try to balance great services, great schools, great recreation, and public safety with the taxpayer burden. And last year, we did pretty darn well. We managed to increase the tax burden only 2.9% when it was all said and done. This year is going to be very demanding, and it's less predictable. So in the past, I've come in with a recommended go-ahead percentage. I think it's going to take us a couple of steps to get to that kind of conclusion. Why is next year demanding? Well, FY27 has the big drivers of healthcare and COLAs, which would be 2.5% and 2.7% go-aheads alone, just those two. And healthcare could even be higher. Healthcare, that single line's going up 19% between Health Trust and school care, our other health provider. So that means another 2.9% or 3% budget really is not attainable unless we were willing to eliminate, by my math, more than 40 positions. And that would be terrible to services. On the other hand, you know, if we just roll forward with a 5% plus tax increase, that's tough for our taxpayers who've just had revaluations. And a majority of our homeowners have had double-digit increases in their taxes. So, you know, somewhere in the range of 3.5% to 5%, I think, is where we have to find the balance of good schools, good parks, good infrastructure, good public safety versus managing the tax burden. But rather than, unless the council deliberates and wants to set a number tonight, rather than do that, I thought we should talk about a process. It seems essential that we forecast the same services budget without hiring any added people. And then ask the city manager and finance department to give us an update on the open positions and pending retirements. And then see if there's any opportunities to use attrition to streamline. You know, we rarely have had to resort to layoffs because that's not good for morale, but there are opportunities. When retirements happen, when positions are open for a long time, to really review how we operate. And this is not by any means saying we should have a hiring freeze. As Councilor Bagley would say, that's non-strategic. When you do a hiring freeze, you don't get to pick what things you're going to continue to do and what you're not going to continue to do. Or if you have somebody who maybe isn't doing the top job, you say, but I can't let him go because then I'd lose the position. That's not a healthy way to manage. So, but I think we can look at things like, you know, between the 26 FTEs in the school custodial staff and the 14 custodial building staff in DPW, are there any consolidations and efficiencies there? Combining the separate IT departments that serve the city and the schools and the police into one IT organization. An early retirement incentive. Perhaps we could get some young teachers to come in who would bring us fresh ideas and fresh thinking. We've got new accounting systems and new police software. Are there efficiencies that we can get out of that? So I think those are the things that I hope we take a careful look at because we know that we've got these healthcare costs really coming at us down the track. And anything we can do to be smart and be efficient. You know, efficient government is good government. And that's, I think, what we have to push to do over the next couple of months. So we're looking, I think, for the best balance we can find between 3.5% and 5%. And I would clarify that that should be in the amount the tax burden goes up, because we have a healthy, vibrant economy that produces tax-based growth, and we should factor that into our calculations rather than simply be cost managers. We need to look at the whole city and how its dynamism will help us. So those are my thoughts, and we'll see what other people think.
Other thoughts? Councillor Bagley?
Yeah, thank you, Erner, and thank you, Councilor Tabler, for bringing this up. I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think this is going to be a particularly challenging budget season because of the large increases in health insurance and other fixed costs, the cost of retaining our staff. We have to look for efficiencies. I think we should also be cognizant that when the revaluation happened, there was a dramatic shift from commercial and industrial uses and tax paying to the residents. So the residents have been hit especially hard the last couple of years, partly because of the way the state raises its revenues and leaves to local governments to pay for most things relative to other states, which allows for us no income tax or no sales tax, which we have no control over, we're saying here at the council. So I think that's important for us to keep in mind. But I think we need to take an even sharper look this cycle than we have in the past, and I think we've found some good efficiencies in the past, but we may have to look at some of the things that we really don't want to cut, but may need to cut just to keep that tax burden a little bit more manageable, especially for those on fixed incomes.
Thanks, Councillor Bagley. Councillor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. As many of you remember, last year I was really tough on the budget because I wanted to come in no higher than the Social Security COLA. And in the end, because of increased development, the tax rate actually did come down to pretty much my target. So I really think that the city manager and her staff did a fantastic job working to get that budget under control last year. This year's going to be really tough. And I, again, would like us to see us not coming in above the Social Security COLA, but I don't see how we're going to do that given the increase in healthcare costs. They are so significant that they alone would drive the budget almost there. And that's a real challenge, and that would mean cutting lots of services across the board, which I don't think is what the residents want. At the same time, I'm really mindful of the fact that it's not just the city that's facing these budget constraints. It's all of our residents as well, whose health insurance costs have been going up significantly, who are seeing cuts themselves, facing still inflationary pressures in store. So we have to somehow find a good balance. I absolutely do not want to go as high as a 5% increase because I think it's just too high for our residents. Frankly, I think 4% annual increases are too high for our residents because ultimately that drives people out of their homes in retirement because they didn't anticipate the tax rate going up that much annually, and they hit an age where they can no longer afford to pay for those tax increases because they're living on a fixed income. So I don't want to see us driving people out of their homes. So I would echo what Councilor Tabor has said, that we need to try to find places where we can make cuts that I would call initially gentle cuts, not replacing people who are retiring, looking very carefully at any additional costs that we can potentially cut, maybe even considering potential changes to the approved CIP budget, even though those changes really do not drive this rate down significantly. I think that's important to remember. We can make big cuts there, but it doesn't really make much of a difference overall unless we make huge cuts, which is untenable. So I think that it's going to be really important through this process we keep reevaluating. And we might end up having to have a few additional work sessions and a few earlier than usual on the budget. I know we're starting with a discussion this Thursday with the schools. That was really designed to discuss capital projects in the end, but they've been working on their budget, and they will have had 4 hearings themselves on their budget, so I'm sure there will be some discussion around that. We may need to have discussions in advance as well with the police department, the fire department, about where their budgets are coming in advance of our regular budget sessions.
Councillor Cook? I think, is there a motion here for, or just this is just a written, that you're requesting these? Okay, so I would say that the, in terms of, a hiring freeze, I wouldn't be as maybe opposed to it as Councillor Bagley or Councillor Tabor, only from the standpoint, this is the city manager's budget and being able to work with things in terms of how are we getting to where we ultimately need to find efficiencies. It might make that easier long-term. I think that there's never been, we had out-of-district placements that went up significantly last year. The health insurance, going up, 26%, potential assessment on top of that, 11% on the health care or the health trust side. And I know I'm now talking like inside baseball, but there's a lot of pressures that we are facing. And so where we might not have had the willingness to do, I'm not even talking about painful cuts, but painful consolidations, meaning what does our IT, look like across all departments? What is our DPW and our facilities maintenance crews on the school side look like across departments? I think that in order to get to any number that's above 2.5%, 3%, which is likely the case, everybody's going to look at the budget and say, what do we do to streamline more than we are now? And so I hope as the budgets are going through the Fire Commission, Police Commission, School Board, it is with that view that we are trying to streamline as much as possible to show to our bosses, to the voters out there, that we're doing everything we can to uncover efficiencies where possible. That's what I look forward to having the conversation on with the school board this week. That's what I expect to have the conversation on with the fire and police commissions to come up with. And when it comes to, I guess, the overall staffing levels, and when we think about retirements, we have invested in technology over the last 5 years. The expectation is that every person in the city of Portsmouth will be more productive. Now, there's a limit to productivity when it's a hands-on, person that's doing, the work at a sewer plant. But when it comes to, government administration, we should all be even more efficient with the technological investments that we've made. And if we are not, then those were made in vain. So we'd expect everybody to be more efficient and to be able to consolidate more retirements than ever because that's why we made those investments in the first place. So look forward to the opportunity to have these discussions with our counterparts, the school board, fire, police commissions, and then for what the city manager is going to get back in terms of the first pass that we have here. It will be tough sledding, but that's the name of the game.
That's why we get paid the big.
Oh yeah, well, that's careful, John. There are people that believe that there's a salary associated. That is, not measured in the hundreds of dollars. Okay, on to Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I wanted to open up a discussion today about childcare. And as we all know, childcare is one of the most consistent issues that people are facing today. And it's not an abstract issue. It's a day-to-day reality. People are on wait lists. They're juggling schedules, a half day here and grandma comes here, and it's unreliable for many folks. And they have to make their decisions about whether or not they can go to work based on childcare. So for those listening that might not be in the trenches of toddlerhood right now, like I am, or if you raise children in a different era, I'd like to just paint a brief picture of what childcare looks like today. So in New Hampshire, full-time childcare for an infant and a preschooler averages around $32,000 per year. For a median income New Hampshire family, so median income in New Hampshire is around $112,000. This family with young children, that can represent close to 28% of their annual income. And the federal affordability benchmark for, the percentage of household income that goes to childcare is 7%. Again, it's at 28% right now. So this means that families are really sitting down and having to do some hard math. Can both parents afford to work? Or does one income essentially get absorbed by childcare costs? And for single income households, that share of the cost burden can be even higher. It's 44% of a single male income in our state, and it's about 64% for a single female income in our state, because we know there's a wage gap. So workforce participation becomes more of a financial calculation more than a lifestyle choice. And locally, we're seeing, multiple childcare programs with wait lists, including the city programs and in the major daycare providers around the area. So even when families can afford care, they can't always access it. On a personal note, we didn't get off at least 3 wait lists by the time my son was 18 months old, and we got on those wait lists in my first trimester of pregnancy. So, and that's not uncommon. People were like, oh, you're pregnant? Tell your husband and then sign up for childcare. So it's ridiculous. But I was heartened to see, so there is some momentum at the state level going on right now. So House Bill 1433 is being heard in the House Ways and Means Committee today. And this is for business tax credits for employers who are going to create or expand childcare. And side note, if you haven't ever participated at the state level of government, you can go and you can Google New Hampshire House of Representatives online testimony. There's a 30-second form where you sign in. And I would encourage people at home, you have until midnight to do it tonight, to go in and support this bill that is allowing businesses to access tax credits when they create or expand childcare. So, this tells me that this isn't just a Portsmouth issue. It's a statewide priority. I've also spoken with Ben at the Chamber Collaborative. He actually went and testified for this bill this morning at the State House because Portsmouth businesses that are involved in the Chamber are feeling this too. Childcare is an infrastructure issue. The workforce is suffering because of the lack of childcare, the cost of childcare. And so tonight I'd like to propose a practical next step to stand up a time-bound, open to suggestion on the length of time, but a city-led childcare access and quality working group with a small steering team and a broader advisory network. So the point here is, to clarify, it's coordination. I don't want to create a new program. We're not asking the city to run childcare. I would like to ask the city to connect the dots across the areas that we already touch: zoning and land use, permitting, change of use, public health considerations, economic development, workforce impacts. So I would like to see a snapshot of Portsmouth childcare today, what exists, what ages are served, where the gaps are. Investigate the local barriers, identify the quick wins, and bring back partnership options, including employer-supported models and adaptive reuse of commercial space, because as we all know, with COVID hit, the bigger office buildings may be going unused or underused. And I'd like to see, one of the deliverables be an implementation roadmap with realistic costs, potential funding sources, and really a roadmap to move the needle on childcare. So if there's support, I'd like to return with this recommendation in 90 days. I don't know. I'm new to all of this business. I don't know how long this would take, but a short term so that we can get the roadmap and implement it. Thank you for your time. Open to discussion.
Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Bagley, then Councillor Blaylock.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Childcare is a big issue, and I think it's not talked about politically a lot because the people that tend to need childcare the most, parents of young children, have typically the least amount of time to attend city council meetings and state meetings, so they're kind of a there's a marketing gap there because the people that need it the most probably have the least amount of time. And one of my other hats, I'm the chair of the Seacoast Y Advisory Board, and we're quite involved in childcare in the area, and we've been trying to, do some new things, and we're always looking at ways to resolve these challenges, which are, a lot of them are driven by the fact that we don't have enough childcare specialists, either due to wages or to the requirements to them. And then there's also nuances that a lot of the pre-K childcare for the toddlers pays for the care for the infants because of the ratio between teacher and recipient of the child care. So it's a pretty complex problem. So I like your idea of maybe having a task force or some sort of committee that looks at this and just make sure that we're doing all the things we can. I know there have been some changes in zoning, both at the state and local level, to allow childcare in places that it hasn't been allowed before. But I don't know that anybody's ever brought it forward at this level before and said, let's take a really hard look at this and make sure we're doing all the things we can be doing. So I love the idea.
Councilor Boyle?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Councilor Hopkins, for bringing this up. My sister has 3 children under the age of 4 right now, and I do all I can to help her. She's a teacher at Exeter High School. We also run the Old Fairy Lane restaurant together. So she's very busy mom. My parents help out, but I understand the challenges and, the costs. I know in the rec department, when the changes happened to peak, the after-school care over in Franklin, the Portsmouth Rec Department developed the after-school care and enrichment program that has been working very well for elementary school students. It doesn't cover children younger than elementary school age, but that's been an improvement. It's a new program that started this September. They bus the kids from the elementary school to community campus and are able to watch them till 6 p.m. So that's something that we can look at. Might be a little foundation for this, but I'm encouraged to see what the city could come up with to try to help. And I do agree that, most of these parents are so busy that they're not here speaking at public comment because they have to take care of their children.
Thanks, Councilor Boyle. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Councilor Hopkins, for bringing up this issue. It is a really important one. When my husband and I decided to have children, we were living in New York City, and we both had wonderful jobs, but childcare would take up the entirety of one of our incomes, and it took both of our incomes to pay rent. So ultimately, we left both of those jobs and moved. We ended up here on the Seacoast because we had to move if we wanted to have children. And at the time, I thought, well, we're moving to this wonderful community where I see all these kids growing up. I still had troubles finding childcare here, by the way, which delayed work options for me, and that was extremely challenging. But I at least could find childcare at that time and afford it. Now that my child is approaching 20 years old, I'm watching parents here do the same dance we did in New York City. And so parents here are saying, I can't live in Portsmouth anymore because it takes both of our incomes to pay our housing costs, and we can't afford childcare. So the choice is, do we have children, do we not have children? And that not only impacts that family, but it impacts our community, because it means we're not attracting families with young children because they can't afford childcare and housing at the same time in the city. Housing's enough of a challenge, and then you add childcare to it, and it's almost insurmountable. So I think that this is a really critical issue. We have, as a council before, handled issues not that were this big by creating a task force kind of model. We did this with the Archives Committee initially, where we brought together the stakeholders in the community to talk about ways to deal with a storage problem for historical archives that the city was also facing. So I think that task force model can be a great one. And we had several task forces during COVID that really helped provide relief. So I think that it would be a great idea to go ahead and move forward to establish a task force and bring a lot of the interested groups together to have this discussion, and then have some early deliverables.
Any other comments? I would agree in terms of just the path forward. A maybe a staff-led task force that cuts across both our resources would be a way to give a report back in landscape. If we're going to involve kind of larger, groups, we would probably turn it into a blue ribbon committee at some point there. But I think getting at least the scaffolding of like what the lay of the land is right now, they can move faster than setting up the meetings, noticing all of those. And so being able to get like what, I guess singing from the same song sheet, so to speak, would be one quick path forward. And again, I think this is a great idea, and it's great that we mobilized on this a little bit last year with the ACES program. Was it the ACES? Yep. At the rec. I think there was, a little bit of a shock when the national rules changed on what we could do and it was specifically MC3 at New Franklin, which was low cost, but then deemed to be not focused on the mission of MC3. Details in there that are not worth rehashing right now, but it was eye-opening because we were focusing on eliminating just the fact that a lot of parents were expecting child care from this at New Franklin and then no longer received child care, and all of a sudden that was a huge issue. It didn't really start to address the underlying issue of the cost of child care. And we'll talk a lot about affordability when it comes to tax burden. That's one of the levers that we do control. But how do we use the resources of the city, specifically our schools, those buildings, like how could we create an opportunity to extend the opportunity for parents to have childcare close to home and being able to use our resources. Now, as you correctly mentioned and Councilor Bagley pointed out and underscored, there are kind of loss leaders when it comes to childcare, and we want to work with our partners, within that. So making sure that what we're doing is not taking just the easiest low-hanging fruit that are the easiest to watch at the expense of infant care, because that's certainly a big component of this. And so understanding what those components are and the part that the city can play in this through our buildings, through our, potentially paraeducators, finding out what is possible for us is I think, a great use of time to see if there's a delta between what we're doing and what we could do, and if that's worth additional money or simply resources, attached to that. So I think at the request of and I don't know if we need do we need a motion for this? I think
maybe a motion for the city manager to act.
I'd await that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, awesome job. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I still get a vote on it.
I was gonna say, is he gonna call the vote?
And so one other item here, this kind of came out of, I met with the Sustainability Committee, who is a bunch of lovely, lovely people, last week. And one of the topics kind of struck me where they were saying, a lot of the city's priorities, transportation, housing, parks, economic development, they have sustainability implications, but we're not really connecting the dots maybe between these committees, between the EDC and sustainability, between parking, traffic, and safety and sustainability. And there's so much good work happening across all of our committees with dedicated, intelligent volunteers. But I feel like we don't get to see, and this could just be my newbie impression, but we don't really get to see how these committees can build upon each other's efforts. And especially when it comes to sustainability, it's not really a standalone action. It's like, okay, I replaced my LED lights, woohoo, at home. But sustainability, if we take it into, all of our systems and committees and stuff as a lens that can strengthen the work of the city moving forward. And, when committees operate in silos, we risk duplicating effort, we miss opportunities to align our goals. And, I'm very aware, especially as a mom of a 2-year-old, I'm very aware that we are already stretched thin. They're volunteer-based committees. People are really doing the most here. And I don't want to propose more work. I just want to propose better visibility maybe among committees and more connection. And even small, simple communication loops could help us work smarter, not harder. And I, selfishly would, ask that other councils maybe consider sustainability when they're making decisions at the table and having discussions. So again, I'm kind of tossing it open to some collaborative thinking here of, can we experiment with a system where committees share one priority periodically? Is this a newsletter, an email? Because I don't think it would be sustainable, but I'm saying to ask, one representative of this committee to go to that committee meeting and this and this and this, just piling meetings upon meetings. We didn't join meetings to go to meetings. We joined meetings to create and do and move things forward. So something that is as low of a lift as possible, but maybe interconnects. And when folks were talking about this at the Sustainability Committee, I thought, well, I sit here with people that are on every committee that we have. So I'm hoping that maybe the city or city council could get a better communication system. And because, I think residents experience the city as one system, not as separate committees. And so aligning our work, we can be more impactful, more cohesive in the public eye as well. And it could help residents see progress more clearly, build trust in the city's processes. And this could start as a small pilot. I'd just love to hear if anyone else sees value in exploring this and what that low-lift version might look like.
Councillor Bagley. Thank you, Councillor Hopkins.
So there's a really good example of this. Like 3 or 4 years ago, we proposed Zipcar, and we looked at it, parking, traffic, and safety. Zipcar said you had to have at least 20 cars or some crazy number that we'd never reach. So it wasn't viable. But somebody who works for Avia, which is a large microtransit, the largest, it's a multi-billion-dollar microtransit company, was visiting his mom who lives here in Portsmouth and saw the article in the newspaper, so reached out to me and said, have you considered microtransit? And we said, well, we've talked about it, but we don't know much about it. They built the whole presentation about Portsmouth. It was just a great presentation. We got to see it in parking, traffic, and safety. I mean, it basically boiled down to it would take about $1 million in subsidies from the city to get that off the ground, which is probably about what we're going to be spending with Coast in the next year or two. So it wasn't really a viable option at the time, but we had a lot of data, a great presentation. We shared it, I believe, also with the EDC. It never occurred to me that we should share it with the Sustainability Committee. So then it came back from the Sustainability Committee that they're looking to do the exact same thing. And I'm saying, well, we've already done that. But they were unaware we did it because I wasn't on sustainability. They weren't on parking, traffic, and safety, and probably there wasn't anybody on EDC that was on either one of those. So I do think there's opportunities for sometimes we duplicate work, or we're looking to do work that's already maybe been done by another committee that you wouldn't necessarily think of. So I don't actually have a solution to this problem. I just thought that was a good example of here's a situation where that happened, and it would have been great if we had included sustainability, but we didn't think to because we were trying to solve a transportation issue, not in our minds at the time, a sustainability problem.
One way we might, if I could offer a suggestion, instead of trying to have, I guess, additional work between committees. We did just kind of finish up our council goals and alignment there. If there was a way to share, I mean, there is a way, we can just do it, but like to share that with the committees, sat down with Andy, who's now the chair of the EDC, and kind of walked through this in a meeting. We just happened to finish them. I think that it would be, he was like, oh, that's interesting, we're doing that, or we could think about that. If we shared those council goals out for feedback throughout the committees, one, we might be able to further refine those goals, but two, if we can knock out where we do things that align to those goals and kind of highlight them on the committee level, we could have a better alignment on the council level to say, hey, you know, and that has the added benefit of trying to align some of the committees who are always, you know, they have projects that come after them, you know, when it gets sent to them, and they have projects that they, you know, come up with themselves. But if there can be a refinement of this is the direction that we want to lead as a city on these priorities, it might help strengthen, you know, the agendas that those committees have, and to be able to, you know, give us feedback on those. So if there could be a framework that maybe we take to sustainability as a first pass and say, hey, here's the council goals that we have, you know, why don't we start aligning, you know, or just, you know, checking off when we're doing something like this, so it's a very ingestible way for us to get it back to the council on a quarterly basis. These are the things that we've done, aligning to these goals. It could be a way to start without having to make more work for anybody but the person taking the notes. Counselor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think this is a wonderful suggestion. I serve on two committees that have this challenge because they're both arts committees, so they don't have the same purpose. They have very different missions, but sometimes one tries to duplicate some of the efforts of the other. And so it's good that I serve on both because I can have that conversation between the two. And we've had that experience also with sustainability and energy advisory, where it's helpful to have somebody sitting kind of on both so you can get that cross-reporting. Something, though, that I think we could do is we could have a report back system from city councilors. And all the city councilors could, if you have something that your committee's doing that you think would be valuable for somebody else to know, that your committee's not due to do an annual report yet, but maybe we could have an informal report back process that doesn't necessarily go under our names in the packet, but is an extra sheet that, you know, oh, by the way, this committee is doing X, Y, and Z, and you should know about it. Because it might be valuable for other committees to be aware that this is what we're currently looking at. And you wouldn't have to report back all the time. You would report back when you thought there was something meaningful that your committee was doing that somebody else in another committee might be interested in. So it would just be kind of another layer to go in the packet, but not necessarily something that we discussed at the meeting. It's just a suggestion.
Thanks, Counselor Cook. Counselor Tabor, and then Counselor Moreau.
I think this is a great discussion. You know, some committees are like siblings, and some are like cousins, and some are like distant cousins. You know, energy and sustainability are like siblings, and we have a member of Sustainability Committee who sits on the Energy Committee. So we always have that link. You know, housing is kind of a cousin to sustainability. I'm a big believer that committees should set their goals for the term and have a mission statement. We did that in the Housing Committee, for example. And it was not easy to get to a mission statement, as Assistant Mayor Kelly remembers. And then we had quantifiable goals. You know, that if committees do that, that can be shared with the siblings and even the cousins.
Counselor Moreau.
I like all of the ideas. I like not being required to maybe quarterly report, but I think it's nice for us as counselors who sit on all these committees to report back to the other counselors who sit on the other committees. But I think it's also important where you guys looked at something, but you didn't think it was viable, but none of us knew that. So, you know, having a report back from a committee using that example would have been great, because then when sustainability person read it, they'd be like, oh, they've looked at that. And, you know, and our reports could actually have links to the website to just say, here, you can go check this out too. And I just think that would be extremely helpful, because a lot of our, you know, we talk about solar at planning board, we talk about solar at housing, you talk about solar. So you talk about it at every level. But I really like the idea of sending our goals, the whole thing that we came up with, to all of our committees to really review and see where they can align what they're working on to the goals that we've already set. I think it's all brilliant ideas, and I think we can put it all together.
All right, do we need a motion to do that? Or is Counselor Hopkins just going to just try it out in sustainability and see the feedback of that?
And I'll say too, someone who was at the sustainability meeting it was like his team won the championship when he was like, you're also on parking, traffic, and safety, sustainability and parking traffic. It's like the marriage. He was just so excited for this very reason, so that I can carry sustainability into parking traffic. Like it just makes sense. And I see the city and this council as a central hub for this spoke, all the spokes in the wheel. And I think we could maximize that a little bit more, you know, to just maximize our impact and satisfaction, honestly. We like to see what we do take shape.
So maybe I could make a motion that all city council representatives on city committees do a report back maximum like quarterly, but minimum when they have, I don't want to say something to report back, but they've reached a milestone. What do you think? Might
Order a
work?
report back from,
Well, it could be quarterly, it could be every 6 months, right? It could be more than that, I guess, if they have. I don't want to put like a time frame on it, but,
okay?
You want to have them set goals?
and they should align with the city council goals. Yeah. The work that they're doing.
I have a question too. I mean, as we sit here and try to create something kind of off the top of our heads, is there, our communications director is here. Is there infrastructure that's already in the city's websites and networks and stuff like that that we could tap into? Are there staff that could support this in a more efficient way than what we're kind of rambling about? I think what we
Assistant Mayor is looking at something.
I was going to say, I think one of the benefits that we have is that we do have staff that sits in a lot of these communities, and through the city manager, I do believe that we get a lot of this information. I know that there's several staff members, especially like legal and a representative from the city manager's office, or I think in an example of like the EDC, we have the assistant city manager of economic development, Sean Clancy, who then also does things with the chamber. So I do think we do have some of this set up, this structure. I think that what needs to, I believe, be better communicated is not necessarily public, but within within the counselors discussing and not duplicating work. I know that a memory comes to mind very distinctively of when we were looking at outdoor dining and there was conversations, and I remember former Councilor Dutton and Councilor Bagley were talking about a fee, and I was like, hold on, we already have that structure. Like, we've had that structure for 10 years. Because there's a lot of information, and we can only, as people up here doing this, a very part-time basis, absorb so much. So I think part of it is the onus is on the individual counselors, that if you are in your meeting, to link up with another counselor who's on another committee. Or also I think committee structures can be variable. And I think about Councilor Tabor and I with the Housing Committee. It was very important for us that we had someone on there from the school board, and we had somebody on there from the planning board. And so figuring out and whether that is somebody that is sitting in the committee or we are inviting them into those meetings a little bit more could be a way to do it. I personally think, at least for my committees, that I share feedback when it feels relevant, and so I don't necessarily know if we need a motion. I think that's naturally something that occurs, whether that is a committee representative coming here giving a presentation or this committee. I think that just internally, the counselors, if there's something that you feel, as Councilor Bagley highlighted, and a lot of that can be in retrospect, but I think the onus is more on the council representative on that committee to create a internal structure to communicate within it. And I know that it's happened before, but I will say the structure of the staff, and I think the information that the city manager's office gets out to the council as in what is happening in different departments, can also potentially be, if there's feedback from staff in that, and that wants to be increased to something that has one lines about some committees, if we feel that it is relevant, then I would look to the city manager to discuss that.
So just looking to get to an action that we can take or need to be taken, because there's a lot that is here, and also we're discussing the committees kind of in, without them. So I would say one thing that we can do is simply send them the goals with attachment that we are looking for further communication and collaboration amongst them, and to have feedback on the goals as one stated purpose. So I'd await a motion to send, all committees and housing and Blue Ribbon committees the city defined, or the city council goals for 2026.
Second.
All right. And then from there, I think, we would get feedback from the committees, and then, a sense of where they stood in terms of cross collaboration, and especially when one of those aligns to a goal, to make sure that we are all aware of that goal and have that reported back to the council would be one way that we could kind of take this great idea and get a first step on that going forward. Council Blaylock, anything to add?
No, I was going to mention that the EDC did look at the city council goals. We had a nice 3-hour retreat on the Friday at the library. I will share with the council that the EDC was a little concerned that economy, small businesses, employers were not mentioned at all in the goals. So I'll just share that. So that was the feedback.
And you didn't share that with me, but all right, let's work on that and get some feedback on those goals from the committees. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Next is approval of grants and donations. The approval of donation from Paul Gormley and Kimi Iguchi for the Portsmouth Fire Department in the amount of $1,000.
I move to approve and accept the donation for the fire department as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Besides, thank you. All in favor? Aye. There's no informational items, no miscellaneous, or is there any miscellaneous business? All right, then I would wait
These
a
January
motion
meetings.
to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.